afternoon. I'd like to echo what Jess was saying. It's great to see so many of you here. I thought there might be empty seats everywhere, but thank you very much for staying. So my task today is to give a fairly short overview that ties in a lot of the work you've been hearing about in the sessions and in the speeches earlier today, and try and paint the national picture, how it all hangs together and how we see things progressing. We're trying as a nation to move social care, all of social care, to a different place. It's a really big task, and I think we're very, very alert to the fact that we're not yet there yet. As I've been hearing in discussions with you throughout all of the other places I'm in, week out, through a range of pieces of research recently, we're still at the comparatively early stages of a self-directed approach being the default approach to social care in Scotland. But make no mistake, that's the direction of travel. That's what Scottish Government wants to see as just the norm, the way that we do social care in Scotland. And I'm not trying to minimise the difficulties of where we are now. We do understand very much the issues, the challenges and the barriers that you're all interacting with on a day-to-day basis. But it's important to set that vision and to reaffirm that goal. That is where we want to be with self-directed support. And progress is being made. We're 7 years into this strategy, and I'm going to describe a little bit about how that's been structured, where the money's gone, and what we know about the progress and outcomes that have been gained to date. Scottish Government went down the route of self-directed support, very much driven by a whole movement of change, by the voices of disabled people, and knowing that it's the right thing to do. Just to address a point that was maybe made from the podium earlier, from a national policy perspective, self-directed support has never been and will never be linked to reducing budgets. That's not any part of the thinking, the design, or any of the policy direction of this area. So, without further ado, how have we gone about this? You'll know that the principles underpinning self-directed support are all about collaboration and involvement. That should be built into the assessment process. It should be built into how a person chooses, describes and receives their support. And hopefully, the aim that we tried to take in developing this policy was very much collaboration and involvement, working with supported people, with disabled people's organisations, with providers in both the private and voluntary sectors, with local authorities, with commissioners, with the whole panoply of other related professional areas that integration involves. The legislation, the statutory guidance was all designed and worked on collaboratively. What we've tried to do throughout it is to mirror what we want to see happening in practice. And I know that many of you sitting around this room have been involved in these processes to date. Some of the research projects that have been described so far today and some of the other ways moving forward, we always have reference groups that try to take that cross-section of people who are responsible and involved in moving this approach forward. So we have local authority representatives, where relevant we have practitioners, we have quite often Jess in fact, or representatives from independent support organisations. I'll go on to talk about how we've developed and designed the funding round for independent support later, but I know many of you were involved in discussions around that. So the aim is to try and mirror what we're asking of from the social care and social work sectors. So, huge collaboration and involvement in designing the legislation, in designing the policy that goes around it. If we just flip back to that document there, that's our plan. That's how we're trying to make all of the work around this really complicated implementation and embedding of self-directed support. It was very much a plan that came out of a huge process of involvement with hundreds and hundreds of people across Scotland in 2016. It focuses around 4 outcomes, already been referenced today, but the key one is around people. So some of the work that sat underneath that is the funding of independent support organisations. It's work that's been done to try and inform the public generally, but specifically people who might want to access social care or come into contact with social care to understand more about what these changes might mean for them, what more choice and control might be available to them, and a lot of work trying to dig into how can this approach work better for specific groups of people. So there's a lot of specific work that sits under there, but just one small area I'm going to mention is residential care settings, particularly for older people. So 2 small pilots explored some early stages of what does choice and control look like for people in residential care settings. And although at the moment there's regulations saying that option 1 isn't available in residential settings, the rest of the SDS legislation still applies there. So full choice and control, involvement and collaboration should still be happening in residential care settings. And there's a work stream, joint Scottish Government, COSLA, Scottish Care and a range of other folk who are trying to explore where can we find some good practice, write it up and share it about more broadly. So I have a plea for you. If you're aware of really good practice in care home settings, particularly for older people, we'd really like to hear from you. We'd like to go out and write that up, maybe make a short video and just offer it about as this is how it can work. Workers are confident and valued. I've been hearing a lot of discussion today and in many other settings about how we support change, culture change, skills change within the workforce. I said earlier that things are moving on. We know that the standards in social work education, the things that shape and guide all of the degree programs, the probationary settings, those have now been amended. They'll be published shortly. They have a much greater emphasis on choice, on control, on personalisation, on the rights of supported people, not just to be involved, but to make decisions about the things that affect them. We know that a lot of funding has gone into supporting the workforce, into training the workforce, into developing their skills and their understanding. I think what's interesting is that what you particularly tell us is that's not always visible in the conversations that happen on the ground with supported people. So there's a question there. There's something to explore there about why not. Is there something to do with professional autonomy and how easy it is for workers to work in the ways that they believe to be best? Because something I hear frequently from social workers is, this is great. This is what I trained to do. This is what I wanted to be doing when I joined the social work profession. So we know that investment is going into the right places. We know there's a desire to do it. What we need to do is unpick that bit in the middle. That means that for supported people, that isn't necessarily coming to fruition in their assessments, in their conversations and all the rest of it. I was in the commissioning workshop earlier and I don't think I need to explore for you the importance of commissioning, the importance of moving away from a time and task perspective towards one that is more outcomes focused, that allows people's budgets to shape things as much as the hours of support that they might choose to access. And finally, systems are more widely understood, flexible and less complex. Systems plural. We talk about the social care system sometimes as a shorthand, but there's at least 12 different systems that sit underneath it. And most of those different systems, eligibility, commissioning, procurement, audit, legal, finance, most of those systems have accompanying IT systems that shape the way that they're understood and used. It is a mammoth, gargantuan task to unpick all of these systems and to rebuild them around choice and control for supported people. And that is what we are asking the system to do. It's a big task, but it's the way we want to move. It's now 3-4 years since the legislation commenced. When we're talking workforce culture change, when we're talking about the systematic unpicking of all of these systems, sorry, that's a repetition, it's a really big job. It takes time. So I want to reassure you that things are happening and progress is being made while reflecting that what I hear back from you often today and in other settings is a certain sense of frustration perhaps. So I want to describe the kinds of things that Scottish Government are doing to move this forward. So we have a budget. At the moment it's around £9 million a year. And about a third of that goes into trying to shift the system, trying to shift things forward at a national level. So there's a fair amount of work there to think about standards and scrutiny and making sure that those align well with what we're asking social care and social work to do. You'll maybe be aware of the new health and social care standards, if not I'm coming to them later, but they're now all about individual choice, control and quality of experience. That's really important because the Care Inspectorate align their inspections with them. So right now the Care Inspectorate is going back and looking at all of its service level and strategic inspection processes and thinking about how do these need to shift and change to be in line with the new reality of what the system is being asked to do. They're starting with residential care. The pilots are underway right now. We support some strategic, going back to support again, sorry, I have to find a better vocabulary. We fund some high-level strategic support for commissioning. So those of you who were in the Option 2 commissioning workshop earlier, that's about pulling people together at a national level to think about how do we build a shared understanding of what Option 2 could look like. They're working on a model contract that would be available for areas that choose to use, that would be legally compliant and yet comprehensible, shall we say, as short as is possible. We fund Healthcare Improvement Scotland to work at a reasonably strategic level with areas who are trying to make their commissioning more flexible, more responsive, more outcomes focused, and doing it within all the other complicated drivers that they're working to. We work with the Social Services Council, Social Work Scotland, around all of that strategic environment that shapes how the workforce understands its job. So, for example, the SSSC recently revised its codes of practice, and you'll now see things in there for individual workers about dignity, about working with individuals, about their rights to choice or control. You'll see mirror things in the employers section about ensuring that workers are able to do the job that they need to do. We've worked with SIPFA, the Organisation for Finance Professionals, so that there's a financial framework for finance professionals to help them understand what a good job for a finance professional looks like in the brave new world of self-directed support. Because it's a different thing. It's public money going to individuals. And this financial framework is a way of helping them to understand what that means in their profession, for their profession, to support individuals to have the choice and control that is their right. I've made a brief allusion to the need to unpick some systemic issues. We've built up a very, very complex system over the last 30, 40, 50 years. We need to take that to bits, and we need to do it in the round. And finally, advice and advocacy. This is what you in this room, this is what you do. And around a third of our funding since 2015 has gone into this kind of area. We absolutely recognise the need for people to be able to access high quality, independent information that can help them be creative with what they want to do and to identify what matters to them. I know that you're all aware of the new round of funding that's in place, and if you're not, then in your pack there's quite a lot of detail around it. But this was designed collaboratively. We went out and spoke to people, and as a result of that, we've designed a more focused fund, and it's absolutely, going back to Florence's point this morning, about being embedded within a local context. It's more focused on working directly with individuals. There's still elements of strategic development and support that are certainly possible within this funding, but the main focus is around working with people to help them get to where they want to be. And we've also done some research into the value of independent support. That's what Lucy was speaking about earlier. And the reason we're doing that is to build the evidence you need to go and work with strategic decision makers at local level. Anecdotal, well, yeah, we know it's important. It's no longer enough in this day and age. So to have some professional research, academically validated, is a powerful tool to go out and negotiate with. One of the key things Scottish Government does is pull together all of the learning from the money that's, one thing I should have said was about a third of our money goes to local authorities as well, to do that system change and that workforce support that is so vital to unlocking this entire agenda. But one of the key functions of government is all of this funding that goes out, all of this learning, all of this innovation. It's about identifying the learning from it and the impact from it, pulling it back, digesting it, and putting it back out there for you to use and to shift custom and practice, to work with strategic decision makers. Again, it's about building that evidence base that enables you, not just you, I say this to every audience I'm speaking to, but we all have a sphere of influence. We're all able to shift the ideas and the thinking of the people that we interact with. So part of our role is to build that evidence base and make it available for you to use in your settings. I said I'd come back to the health and social care standards. These are really important. They're important because these are the standards we hold the entire health and social care system to. Not different sets of standards for different settings. This, published last year, is the way, these are the standards we want to hold ourselves to. And it's about I experience the high quality care and support that's right for me. I'm fully involved in all my decisions. I have confidence in the people who support and care for me and confidence in the organisation. I'm sure you can clearly see the links over to self-directed support. Inspections are right now being rejigged to be much more closely aligned to these standards. Please do get to know them and love them, because I think they will have enormous impact over time. And finally, everything I've said, we're now able to place within the context of the reform of adult social care. Self-directed support is not just limited to adult social care. Of course it's not. But there are some particularly large and complex challenges in terms of demographics in the adult social care system. The reform of adult social care is primarily aimed at looking at creating a sustainable system. Sustainable in the broad and holistic sense of that word. Your mind may go to money, and yes, that's a part of it, but sustainability is so much more. Across Scotland, it's not always easy to recruit staff to work in care settings. This is particularly difficult in remote and rural areas. Brexit is likely to have an impact on that as well. Sustainability must incorporate that as well. So it's a broad agenda, and you'll notice several really strong consistencies with what I said we were trying to do with self-directed support. That's not a surprise. Self-directed support and the need to shift the system to a new place is at the heart of this programme of adult social care reform. Now, it's possible you're going, what programme of adult social care reform? See the snowdrops, they're an early spring flower, because it's at a very early stage in the process. What's been going on so far is quite intensive one-to-one discussions to find out, well, what are the challenges and the barriers and the areas of success in your area? What other reform programmes are going on at a national level in public health and primary care? What can we learn from them? How can we join up better? And I want to draw your attention to the thing at the bottom, measuring what we value. We need to get much better at knowing how self-directed support is embedding and which bits are going well and which bits need a bit of extra attention and focus. The framework that Richard's developing, that was up on the screen earlier, the really complicated one, but with people's outcomes at the top, that's what that framework is for. And at the moment, we as Scottish Government don't necessarily ask for information that will help us gauge that. We ask for the detail on who takes which options, and I'm sure you'll all be aware with some of the difficulties and inconsistencies of that data. So a specific strand of activity on figuring out what's really important to know. And it's probably qualitative and experiential stuff. Did you have a good conversation? So there's a really important bit there about measuring what we value. I've been told to finish, but that's fine because this is my last slide. I just wanted to reiterate the Minister, this is Aileen Campbell, the Minister for Public Health and Sport. I want to reiterate the Scottish Government's commitment at all levels to ensuring that self-directed support approaches are implemented across the social care system. Thank you.